roster news only continue as the Los Angeles Guerillas have officially announced their entire lineup coming into Black Ops Cold War. Now, we knew in terms of the old Guerrillas team, the roster that existed in Modern Warfare, we were aware of the fact that they have kind of dropped pretty much every single player except for one, that being Vivid from their prior team. It was made known to the public that those players were in fact free agents. Vivid really never made anything known about that, which kind of gave us the idea, or at least the inclination, that he most likely is staying with this team, which of course ends up being the case. And we also find out through this release not only confirmation of those other players not being signed, Vivid being re-signed, but we also learned about the other players that will be joining alongside Vivid moving in to, again, the Cold War season. That being Apathy, Assault, and Silly will be on the starting team. And for the Academy roster, we've learned that Chino and Mental are being signed as official substitutes. And for the Academy team specifically, that will be where Exceed and Nero are primarily challenger players. So there is kind of this difference of the two. Chino and Mental are pretty much direct substitutes. The others are a part of the challengers team, at least for now, and we'll kind of see exactly how that kind of continues as time develops. And I will say, before we even jump into this kind of major change that this franchise has from year one into year two, the Los Angeles Guerillas are a team that benefits from the lack of expansion. There have been a number of different times where we've talked here on Off the Break about teams that are benefiting teams that aren't, for a majority of organizations, especially franchises that did not necessarily perform up to their standards. This is going to be a good, or at least a better year for them. They are going to benefit in some way. Let's say that a team, you know, finishes all last season around the top 8 position in terms of the standings, not necessarily in terms of direct placements at home series, but just say that they're around like the 8th position throughout the entirety of the year. If that team even still places in the top 8 this season, you could almost potentially look at that as an improvement based on the fact of the players that they have, based from a branding perspective. If they are getting more known players, you could argue that by definition, placing 8th moving into 4v4 is more impressive than placing 8th in last season, because of how much the title changes, because of the level of talent that only increases coming into this year as well. So there are arguments for that, but from a branding sake specifically, I think that a lot of teams are going to improve on their net worth. They're going to improve just in general based on the personalities they have, on the faces that they have for their teams, not only just in regards to placements. And so I think the same is going to be said for the Guerillas here. I don't think we're going to be seeing them finish in 12th every year, or rather, in every title or home series coming into this season. I think it is going to be different. I think this is a team that dramatically improves because of the lack of expansion. There is no excess competition coming into this year, and I think that's the reason why they've landed the players that they have. And again, kind of touching briefly on last season, it was very poor, right? I mean, the Guerillas kind of got off to a hard start to the season. It was just really not, in general, a good year all around for them. They finished outside of the top 6 once all season long. They got bounced out of champs in a top 12 placement, had a pretty complicated season from really start to finish. They start off with Aches, Aqua, Decimate, Lacefield, and Saints coming into their home series just pretty much a month or so later. They bring in Vivid, Spart, and Blast. At one point, I think maybe a few months later from that kind of major roster change, the biggest roster change of the CD up to that point, they later sub out Spart for Saints, and kind of from there, the rest is history. And I feel like the issue with the Guerrillas specifically kind of started from the very beginning, because there were a lot of rumors around this team saying that they have in fact started late. They kind of joined the party a little bit late in terms of the way that a lot of other rosters began. They obviously had talent, there's no doubt about it. But I think it's fair to say they kind of lacked cohesion. This didn't really feel like a team. It kind of felt like a lot of great pieces that were kind of thrown together. Again, when you look at the team that they had announced originally, and you think of their talent individually, it's great, right? You're looking at a number of different players who have been phenomenal for their teams. You're looking at Slayers like Saints, Slayers like Lacefield, Slayers like Aqua. I mean, a number of different talented pieces, Decimate included. Obviously, you have Aches there for a reason. The way that this team was composed was right, I think. But in terms of the way that they worked together, it just never really equaled out to what they wanted. And again, you have some big personalities on this team. Roster changes were very prominent throughout the year, as we've already talked about. And the decision that they made early on to kind of go young showcased that they wanted to make an instant pivot. Like, things were just not working. To make a roster change that drastic goes to show that the team was already kind of thrown in the I guess you could say kind of thrown in the bin, if you will, already that early in the season, which is pretty interesting, at least from their perspective. And I think one major positive that they do get is that they discover a great rookie in Vivid, right? This guy comes onto the team along with Spart. There were some high expectations. I had known him obviously from the challenger side, or rather kind of from the amateur side, known as a super fast SMG player, probably one of the fastest players in the entire, I guess you'd say kind of competitive side of Call of Duty, professionals included, and he managed to make that style work really kind of for the Guerrillas all season long. He was the bright spot for them time in and time out, and oftentimes was the primary storyline coming into a lot of these series was going to be, how can he progress, how is he playing? And so I'm really excited to see him kind of move into his second year, his first official start to a CDL season, or to a kind of high level competitive season. And we also kind of look ahead to his teammates, at least in regards to the starting lineup, right? You have Silly, Apathy, and Assault. This, of course, rings a bell to many Call of Duty fans, as this was the World Championship team back in 2018 in World War II under Evil Geniuses. Considering that also is the last boots on the ground title that we've had since then, is also pretty prestigious. Whenever it was the Guerrillas who kind of made this announcement video, that was instantly what they noted. So this, I'll say this, and we'll kind of get into it more. It's not a coincidence that these three players are being paired with one another, and it's not a coincidence that that video just happens to be, you know, something like, oh yeah, they're the you know, this just happens to be 3/4 of that World Championship team. It's not a coincidence, right? This is all for a reason. And then you talk about the Minnesota Rocker integration. You have Silly, Assault, Exceed, who of course is going to be on the Academy team, at least to start off the season. You have some major kind of Rocker integration, which I think is going to be good for this team. And then just in general, when you talk about the SMGs for this roster as well, Vivid and Apathy together could make for a very, very strong SMG duo. And I feel like this is something that Apathy really can benefit from, the same way that Vivid can benefit from this as well. Because you talk about Apathy, his career, of course, is a two-time world champion. The last time that we saw him on boots was him winning a world championship with EG. But it's been some time since he's really had a very fast SMG to run alongside of him. Because you talk about Slacked on Seattle, not really that player. Before that, maybe you talk about Hook, maybe on the Envy team. Whenever that EG roster that won champs goes on to Team Envy, they added Hook to the lineup to start off Black Ops 4, which obviously was not a success. And then from there, maybe we're going back to like John on the prior Envy team, who obviously went to back-to-back champs grand finals. They obviously won champs back in Black Ops 3. So I think this can be a great opportunity for Apathy to be alongside a fast SMG slayer, someone who I kind of compare very similar to a young Apathy. I think it's kind of, in terms of the way that they play, the pace at which they play, the strength in certain times, and the way they can take over games is very similar. And I think just in general, the integration from someone like Apathy, I think, can be a great option for this team. Obviously, he has shown previously that he necessarily can't always be the number one option. He wasn't the number one option for that EG team back when they won champs, at least all the time. And I think this could be great for both of them. Vivid, again, can be a piece where he can really light it up from time to time. We saw that with the Guerrillas roster. He has the ability to take over games, and this season will kind of showcase if he can kind of be more consistent, if he can kind of be that consistent piece that you can rely on from game in and game out. And I think with that 5v5 to 4v4 transition, it's going to be more apparent, and more, I would say probably easier for him in a lot of different instances to kind of be more consistent based on the level of players that are around. And then you also talk about Assault, right? The last time that we saw Assault on boots on the ground, he was not only winning champs, but he was also winning the champs MVP. Obviously, like I said, back in 2018 under EG. And in that season, people have forgot how incredibly talented he was at that game. Was by far one of the best ARs in the entire title from the beginning to end. Had a very, very solid season. Of course, here for Rocker most recently as well. And I think if he can be as impactful as he was with the Rocker, but primarily with that team back in World War II under EG, that is going to be a huge boost for them, because he very well, depending on the meta, depending on how this game works, he could be their best player, especially from a statistics point of view. So I think this is a huge move for the Guerrillas to make, because they are bringing in someone like Assault, who I think can be a steady piece, obviously has the integration with someone like Silly, because they've obviously played on a number of different titles with each other most recently. Has the history with Apathy as well. And when we talk about his numbers back in World War II, they were excellent. I mean, 1.11 across Hardpoint and Search and Destroy, a 1.20 in Domination throughout the year, led in KD numbers kind of throughout the entirety of the season, and I think can be great. And we talked about kind of his duo as of late. Silly, underrated throughout this past title of Modern Warfare. You know, he was a great leader, didn't have a standout season for the Rocker, but I really wouldn't say that was necessarily his role. I think he got some great experience kind of working with this team. He oftentimes was kind of looked upon as the face for Rocker, I feel like, especially in content pieces. And again, he was excellent for that EG World War II team as well. He looked like a different player after he was dropped off of Reunited, and I would say that was probably some of his best performance was in kind of that span of the ending of World War II, and on that Black Ops 4 roster for Envy was excellent. I mean, really, kind of in terms of the way that he transitioned from one title to the next, he was excellent kind of throughout that span, and I think has the ability to do that yet again for this roster. Now, quickly, as we kind of round things out, this will be, in my eyes, a very underrated team. I think that they will be. I think you're looking at this team, you're looking at, you know, kind of the Rocker guys. You're saying Apathy doesn't have a great year on Seattle. Rocker doesn't close out the season well either. And while Vivid was nice, for sure, I think that it isn't necessarily going to be as big of a spotlight on this group in comparison to others. But I think that this team could almost be Rocker-esque to last season. And that's not just because of the players that they have, you know, 3 of those guys coming from the Minnesota Rocker joining this team. It's not just because of that reason, but I think it's because of the potential cohesion that they'll have together as well. I think this is going to be a team that can look great off the start. I think they possibly have enough legs, if you will, to kind of progress them into the next season, or rather kind of, I should say, kind of throughout the next season. Again, you have Assault and Silly, who are coming into their 4th straight title together. They're obviously combining back with Apathy, who has a history with them in terms of winning that world championship back in World War II. And not to mention the coach who is on this Guerrillas team in Bevels also played a huge part in that EG World Champs team, was building up the strategies, was so influential for them, especially in Search and Destroy, that allowed for them to come away with what was an unbelievable world championship win as well. So again, it's not just the players, but it's also the coaching staff who has already been with this group prior, which I think can be a recipe for success. And that's the reason why at the start of the video I said there's a reason for why it's not just like, oh yeah, that team, you know, they did win champs together. It's no, this was planned. This is Bevels, of course, trying to get back with this group, and I think that they do have a solid recipe, especially for someone like, especially for someone like Vivid being integrated to this team. I think that they have a lot of great potential. And then very briefly touching on the substitutes, I also like this move as well, because I believe that there is potential that we could see one of the substitutes possibly step in throughout the year. Now, I'm not saying any name specifically, but I think just in general, I think that you have some really, really excellent pieces that could provide something. Obviously, we talked about Mental. He officially gets signed to the Guerrillas lineup, which I think is excellent. We've talked about him quite a bit in depth. When we talk about his transition from Gears of War now to COD, excellent, excellent player. I mean, one of the greatest in Gears of War at this moment, and he is choosing to instead transition here over to COD, which I think will be great. You had some great subs here. We saw Exceed kind of toward the end of the season for Rocker substitute in. Obviously did it kind of in the middle of the season for Alex when he had that injury. But Exceed looked pretty solid all around. I think it's fair to say. Nero is a great player. I know in terms of Search and Destroy can be a great presence. Chino was looked upon as an excellent kind of 6th man for Optic. Got the chance to start for a little bit. So I think you have some very, very intriguing substitutes for this team as well. And this will honestly be one of my most interesting teams to look at that I think will not receive a whole lot of spotlight. This is a roster that I will be looking at quite intensively when we talk about the season starting up. I think this is going to be an under-the-radar team, a team that I think has the ability to kind of prove a lot when it comes in a 4v4, a team that improves a lot when we talk about this transition as well. You have a lot of potential slaying power, and I think most primarily you have a team that can work very well together, kind of given these circumstances. Now, obviously, not everything is going to be perfect. This isn't the most perfect lineup, I think, in the CDL right now by any means, but I think this is a team that is going to be underrated, and I think this is a team that can be consistent, and if you have enough, I'll say this, if you have enough of those pieces light up the way that we know that they have previously, I think this is a team that, again, could really start to turn a lot of heads, and I'm very, very excited to see the next year for the Los Angeles Guerillas moving into Cold War.